So, back in May of 2025, something pretty terrifying happened. Two nuclear-armed neighbors, India and Pakistan, got pushed right to the edge of an all-out war. And it all went down in just 4 days. We're talking about a regional crisis that just exploded. Missile strikes, massive air battles, and this frantic behind-the-scenes scramble to pull everyone back from the brink. This is the story of what they called Operation Sindoor. So the big question we've got to ask is, how? How did things spiral out of control so fast? You've got decades of tension, sure, but how did that ignite into open conflict that had literally the entire world holding its breath? Okay, let's get into it.
All right, to really get what happened here, you have to understand Kashmir. I mean, this is the heart of the issue. It's this territory that both India and Pakistan have claimed since 1947. And it's split by this incredibly militarized border, the line of control. Think of it as a constant flashpoint. It's been the cause of major wars, countless smaller fights. It's basically the simmering pot that was just waiting to boil over. And boy, did it ever.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll look at the spark that lit the fuse in Kashmir. Then we'll walk through those 4 insane days of fighting. After that, we'll dive into the war of narratives, because what each side said was happening is a story in itself. We'll see how the world stepped in to cool things down, and finally, we'll wrap up with the big lessons learned from staring into the abyss.
So, where did it all start? With one single brutal attack. An event that became the trigger for a really rapid and frankly terrifying escalation.
Okay, just look at how fast everything went downhill here. On April 22nd, you have that deadly terrorist attack. The very next day, India hits back, but not with missiles, not yet. They suspend a super important water treaty from 1960. A week goes by, and Pakistan comes out saying they have intel that India is about to strike. And then, bam, May 7th, India launches Operation Sindoor. The diplomatic game was over. This was now a military crisis.
26. That's the number that really kicked this whole thing off. 26 civilians, most of them Hindu tourists, killed in that first attack in Pahalgam. And here's the detail that's absolutely crucial. Survivors said the gunmen specifically asked people if they were Hindu before they started shooting. This wasn't random violence. It was a targeted act specifically designed to be as inflammatory as possible. And, well, the blame game started almost immediately. Totally predictable, right? India pointed the finger straight at Lashkar-e-Taiba, a well-known militant group based in Pakistan. Pakistan, for its part, denied any role whatsoever. They condemned the attack and called for a neutral, international investigation. So right from the get-go, the two sides were dug in. No common ground.
So, with diplomacy basically off the table, the conflict moved to the battlefield. Let's get into those 4 days of fire and see what actually happened. India's response got a code name, Operation Sindoor. And you really have to understand the name to get the mindset. Sindoor is that red powder married Hindu women wear. The name was chosen because the attack specifically targeted Hindu men, making their wives widows. So you see, this wasn't just some random military code name. It was a really powerful, really emotional message aimed right at the Indian people.
So, May 7th, the operation kicks off. India sends in its hardware. We're talking Rafale jets with Scalp cruise missiles, and they hit 9 targets that they called militant training camps, and some of these were deep inside Pakistan. Now, India's official story was very clear. These were surgical, preemptive strikes against terrorists, and they insisted they took great care not to hit any Pakistani military or civilian sites.
But Pakistan's version of events was, well, completely different. And this is where you really see the two realities clashing. Islamabad said that Indian missiles slammed into civilian areas. They showed images, like this one, of a mosque in Moradgay that they said was hit during morning prayers, killing 31 people. So from the very first shots fired, what actually happened was completely up for debate.
So, of course, Pakistan hit back. Their counteroffensive was named Operation Bunyana Marsus. It's an Arabic phrase that means unbreakable wall. And just like India's choice, this name was packed with symbolism. The story goes it was taken from a Quranic verse that was etched into one of the mosques that was damaged in the Indian attacks.
And what happened next was just insane. We're talking about one of the biggest, most intense air battles since the Second World War. Get this. More than 114 aircraft in the sky at once. 72 from India, 42 from Pakistan, all engaged in this huge, beyond visual range dogfight over the border. This was not some minor skirmish. This was a full-blown air war between two powerful, modern air forces.
You know, the fighting in the sky was intense, but the battle for information, the war of narratives, was just as fierce.
Both sides were pushing completely different versions of events, not just to the world, but to their own people.
Okay, this table right here is key to understanding the information war. Don't worry about reading every single line. Just look at the pattern. Take aircraft losses, for example. India was kind of vague, just saying, losses happen. Pakistan claimed they shot down 6 Indian jets. So what's the truth? Well, neutral U.S. sources later confirmed at least 2, maybe 3 Indian jets went down. Or look at the ceasefire. India says, we forced them to stop. Pakistan says, no, they begged for a ceasefire. The U.S. version? President Trump basically threatened trade sanctions to make them both stop. You see the pattern? On every single point, 2 completely different stories.
And this newspaper headline pretty much sums up the whole mess. As truce seems to hold, India and Pakistan both claim victory. Of course they did. In the end, both governments sold the conflict as a huge win to their own people. There were celebrations in the streets in both New Delhi and Islamabad. It just fueled this massive wave of nationalism, and politically it meant neither side could ever admit they didn't win.
Okay, so with the situation just spiraling and spiraling, the rest of the world basically had to jump in. There was this frantic, behind-the-scenes effort by global powers to pull these two back from the brink.
At first, the United States was pretty reluctant to get involved, even saying it was none of our business. But then, that position changed, and it changed fast. So what happened? Well, reports suggest that U.S. intelligence started picking up chatter that this whole thing could actually escalate to a nuclear level. And that was the trigger. The fear of nuclear war is what flipped the switch for Washington, from just watching to actively trying to stop it.
And it wasn't just the U.S. A lot of countries played a part here. The Americans definitely took the lead. VP J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio were apparently locked in negotiations for 48 hours straight. China's role was interesting. Publicly, they were neutral, but behind the scenes, they were supplying Pakistan with military gear. And for them, it was also a golden opportunity to see how their weapons performed in a real fight. Then you had the UK and the UN, both pushing hard for de-escalation, trying to use every diplomatic channel they had.
So, when the dust finally settled, what did we actually learn from these 4 days of chaos? Let's get into our final section and look at the big takeaways and how this whole mess really changed things. If you're trying to figure out who won, well, the truth is, nobody really did. It was more of a mixed bag for both sides. For India, the win was proving they could strike deep inside Pakistan and getting the world to pay attention to terrorism. But the loss was real too. They had advanced jets shot down and had to accept a ceasefire brokered by another country. For Pakistan, the win was showing they could stand up to India and putting the Kashmir issue back on the world stage. The downside? Huge damage to their military bases and, once again, facing tough questions about their links to militant groups. This fight was also a massive real-world test for a ton of military tech. It was the first time we saw some serious hardware in action, like China's PL-15 missiles, which Pakistan used. For India, it was proof that their homegrown stuff, like the BrahMos missile, really worked. And maybe one of the biggest lessons for military planners everywhere, India's multi-layered air defense system was incredibly good at stopping swarms of drones, taking out hundreds of them. But for all the talk about strategy and technology, it's easy to forget the real human cost. And this quote, this one from Lal Din, a man who lives in Kashmir, just brings it all crashing down to earth. He says, we're just numbers in this clash of nuclear powers. I beg both sides, resolve your differences, live in peace, and let us live. For the people actually living there, this isn't a game of chess, it's about life and death, and his words are just a powerful reminder of who really suffers. And so, that brings us to the big, unsettling question we're left with. Yeah, the fighting stopped, but the root problems, Kashmir, terrorism, they're still there. Nothing's been resolved. And with both sides convinced they won, you have to wonder, is this a real, even fragile peace? Or was this whole 4-day war just an intermission?